But that was good. That was real good.
We're live. Another episode. Popular opinion. My man Brandon, how you doing, bro?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Um, we've been pretty much for most of the day discussing the events that have unfolded. The verdict came in with Derek Chauvin, and
Right.
he was found guilty on all three charges, which I guess was a little surprising to me. I thought he'd be guilty, but I didn't know if he would be guilty on all three charges. So, just wanted to talk a little bit, about that and see if anybody comes on. Anyone has any questions? How they feel about the verdict? If they're
Right.
happy about it, are they still concerned? About light sentencing. Do they think that this may change things now within the judicial system and law enforcement? I think that's a good segue to start, man. How do you think? Because you and I pretty much have talked about the charges, and we can go back to that. But
Right.
how do you think this really affects law enforcement going forward?
Well, I think what you're seeing is higher accountability of law enforcement, right? And so you started to see it with the body cams, right? So I think it was like a year ago they introduced the body cams, and so people were like, "Oh no, why do we need body cams?" And in fact, even in the prisons, my dad, he just recently retired as a correctional officer, and they were introducing body cams for the COs. and and people were against it there. And I'm like, well, if you're doing procedures, you're doing everything you're supposed to do by the book. It's just a validation. So if you get falsely accused, we talked about the complaints, right? The complaint versus a sustained complaint. That's gonna be your vindication, right? It's gonna validate that what happened or what didn't happen, right? And so I think what you're seeing is that again, that higher level of accountability for cops, and it should be high, just as high it is for the military, right? Where I mean, it's a high risk job. I get it. Um, we talked about qualified immunity, right? About and I think that still applies, right, for situations where you, as an officer, are engaged in a situation. Someone opens fire on you, you return fire, you disable the suspect, right? You go to arrest them, you call for medical assistance, and for whatever reason, that person doesn't make it, right? Should you then be charged with murder for a situation that required you to use deadly force? And so I
Well,
still
well,
think,
the qualified immunity it affects from my understanding, it only affects the civil side. So as long as the officer's not doing something
oh, okay,
corrupt, right, that would amount as a crime, uh, qualified immunity protects law enforcement
from
from
being
civil
sued, right?
recourse. Yeah,
Right. Okay. So yeah, I think what you're gonna see then, I mean, what you're seeing now is that level of accountability, right? That it's just not gonna be oh, you're just gonna be fired or let go. That you're if your actions result in the death of somebody that could have been preventable, um, then then you're gonna see prosecution. And
and
this is probably one of the more extreme cases, right? It is not like this is really one of those egregious cases of that abuse, right, or of that not following procedures.
I think this how it happened. I don't want to say it needed to happen because that's horrible. Someone lost their life.
Right.
This was like I think really the litmus test of okay, we've seen a lot of things that have been, we go, questionable, right? A lot of people questionable, questionable. This was one of those that I think people were like, there's not a whole lot of question in that. There's only an idiot would think that's okay.
Right.
And everybody stood by to see, can cops do anything? I think that's really what was on trial. Is
Right.
it okay? I know a lot of it also is built around race, right? That can our you know is society going to stand by to watch police officers do this to black people? I'm not bringing that into it. I looked at it as, is is there going to be, this is it, you know, they've gone too far. This particular officer, he went too far. And I think that this is what we saw today, that um, there's going to be a higher degree of accountability, I think, going forward, that on prosecution for police officers who are, and I'm okay with that. I know that makes people mad, and you always hear these, oh, it's just a few bad apples. Well, they always forget the rest of that saying is, a few bad apples spoil the whole bunch, right? And I'm okay with the verdict. I I'm glad, and going forward, hopefully this sends a message to everyone who's in law enforcement that you need to do your job. You need to do it to the letter of the law,
Right.
and because our number one thing is, it's to protect and it's to serve, it's to help other people, right? In the example I used earlier, when the SWAT team shot the guy, he had a gun. He was
Hmm.
pulling out a gun on him. They shot him, and as soon as they shot him, they handcuffed him, and then they began rendering aid,
Right.
because you have to go from taking someone into custody. They go from a suspect to, now you have to render aid and help them, right? Because remember what I said: force, reasonable force necessary to effect an arrest, overcome resistance, prevent escape. If you do more than that, then you should have to be accountable for your actions.
And I think with this, you had a lot of situations going on, right? You had George Floyd, you had that one cop that you and I talked about it on here, I believe, at one time, where you had that big cop that was beating up the little boy, right? Where he got him in mount and he was striking him. So you have a lot of situations where situation or things that are going on, right? Dante Wright just happened, right? And the same thing about Dante Wright is, it's the same department, right? And so, and you and I kind of hinted on this when we were on Instagram. Is that this is possible fallout from the, this case right here, right? So George Floyd passes, because of Derek Chauvin's um, irresponsible act, and then they go defund the police. They cut funding, people quit, and now they want to bring people back and try to hire more cops because they don't have enough cops to maintain the peace, right? To do the peacekeeping thing. And so now you have a situation where a cop, granted, people focus on the 26 years, but I tell people that in the military too. Just because people serve a long time doesn't mean they're competent at their job. And
Yeah.
so you have this person, yeah, they had 26 years, but necessarily when you're competent to be a field officer, field training officer, right? And then they're in this situation where they don't have the competence they should have, and then this incident happens with Dante, and it's just sad that you have the same police department in a year's time frame have two tragic accidents, two tragedies that could have been avoided. One was obviously uh, connected because of the fallout or some of the things that happened, but still, nonetheless, both were preventable.
E. So E's question is, what can be done to train police officers better? I think, E, the first thing is, somehow, some way, to have some type of standardized training. Um, if we can't do it across 50 states, then I know California, we fall under posts, and posts mandates standardized training that all departments have to be, that we have to keep up with. That that's not happening all across the board. But also, Brandon and I were talking about this earlier on Instagram. Department budgets matter too. If you have, I mean, LAPD is I think they're the second or the third largest police department behind New York and Chicago. So you look at LAPD or CHP, they're going to have big budgets. They're going to have budgets allotted for training and things like that because of the size of their department and the money they're able to get. Where you may have a smaller department that doesn't have the funding. They're not able to send their officers to uh, training. A lot of departments either not able to have in-house training. So like when I went to whenever like I had to go to training, I went up to Northern California. We go different places. I've gone to Anaheim, Ontario, several different police departments that have put on training. And if a department doesn't have the money, or what happens too, if a department doesn't have the staffing. So if you're short staffed and Brandon, you can't take the day off because of, now if you leave, we're going to be below minimum staffing, then you can never go get training. So now we have an officer who's ill equipped to be able to handle himself or herself on the streets. And I think law enforcement, it's evolving. And I think that, unlike the military, I think what's really weird, and Brandon, we touched on this too, is how there are no standards. I think Phoenix PD is one of the departments I can think of offhand that has like I think they give you physical fitness pay and incentivizes you to want to be in shape, to be
Hmm.
better. But other departments and you see this a lot at sheriff departments for whatever reason. You see a guy in tip top shape. They graduate the academy, and then because they sit in courts in the jails or whatever, then they gain an excessive amount of weight.
Right.
Excessive, right? That officer is not able to protect themselves. They're a danger to themselves and the public, because when they get into a situation like we talked earlier, they're not going to be able to deal with the situation. They are more likely to use deadly force or a higher level of force as someone who's trained.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on some of that too, right? With the standardization of training, right? So if everybody's using the same procedure as far as standardizing the training, right? Um, for those departments that can't train themselves, then I can go to another department and go get that same training, right? And so I think it resolves some of those issues.
But that depends on the money.
True.
Because
And so that's still
unless,
budget, right? Still a budget constraint.
and you know this more than anybody being in
Yeah,
the
the military.
service and being and,
And so I'm dealing with that right now, right? So and that's one of the ways we actually get around it, right? So units are allotted so much money. So what I'm having them do is like, hey, if you got this group of people that need to train, and these people have the same group, how about we team up together, or I send instructor, right? If like I have like in the Northern California Travis, I have 3 units in the same on the same base, and so a lot of times the stuff they have to train on is the same. So what I'll do is I'll fly an instructor out, coordinate fly instructor out there and conduct the training. So now all we have to do is try to get the money for the instructor to be funded from another location from the schoolhouse and come out and do stuff for them, right? But it comes on money, but we're trying to stretch the pennies and do like that, right? So
and
um
also some training is non-voluntary. So we would have to go through a course every 18 months, which I think that's not enough. Because during that course, we go through cultural diversity. We'll do building searches. We do a lot of shooting. But I mean, we shoot like every month or every other month anyway. So it's kind of like a fun day to do shooting. We shoot at moving targets, shooting from a vehicle, all that type of stuff. And then typically the day that everybody dreads is the defensive tactics day. That's the
That's a
day that
fun day.
everybody hates. But you know what's funny? Until I hated it too before I became an instructor, just because I enjoy training. So for me, I was kind of like, I don't really, I don't want. I'm like, I don't really need this. Yeah, that's how I would think because I train.
Right, right,
And
right.
but the guys who don't train on a regular are the ones who really need it, and they're the ones that will sit out of. But so every 18 months, we're going over handcuffing. We're going over how to escape from being mounted. If somebody's on your back, those things. It's every 18 months. Those
That's not
people
enough.
leave that facility. It's just like when we go train in jujitsu. I mean, I train off and on, and I sometimes I go once a week, sometimes maybe once a month. So think of this: I may go if I average how much I go train, it may be once or twice a month, not including like when we just go open roll, right?
Right, right, right.
I don't retain that stuff that the instructors teach. So you think that people are retaining that every 18 months?
Heck no.
So that's one of the biggest things is not enough training, and then there's no incentive for like cops don't want to train on their own. I don't know if you've seen that post going around that says cops be like, and then it says jujitsu and training costs too much, and then
Mm-hmm.
it says cops, and then it shows the big lifted truck that's like $80,000 after all the
Right,
lifts and all that.
right.
So it's like they'll spend all the money on the boats and the trucks and all the fancy equipment, but they won't spend the money on training to protect themselves or other people, because it does protect other people. Because if I can take you down and control you and all that, that means that I don't have to hit you with my flashlight and tase you and do all that other stuff. I'm able to control you, so it helps the public as well as helping myself.
Dante Wright. Dante Wright, right? If it was funny because my first reaction, if I would have been in that situation, right? If he tried to roll away, is to like arm drag him, pull him back, right? Grab him by the waist, control him, take him down. And so I think that's where it would help, right? You know what I mean? You talk about that in preventable situations, right?
Well, I think training matters just to be comfortable in situations, because not everybody grew up in a certain way. Like my little bro Eric, the one who just commented on the screen, like
Hmm.
he's a big fella. I mean, and he's extremely strong, and he'd tell you, man, we've always like wrestling around and all that. We're just always super, competitive coming up. I think when you get into this profession, that having to wrestle around with, you know, big strong guys like him and Lex and Peter, some of these other guys, it prepares you for when you go do the job, even though it's it's in a real world situation where you may have
Right.
somebody who's really trying to fight you. But the reality is this: most people are really just trying to get away. And
Hmm.
even a lot of people who are trying to fight you, once you get dominant position on a lot of people, you remember we were talking about the studio, man, you break a lot of people's will just
Right.
asserting dominant position on them. Where I go, man, Brandon's on me, and if he was to start pounding, you just realize, like, man, he could hurt me if he really wanted to. So maybe I should need to just chill. so, so yeah, I don't know. E, you got anything else? I know there's only a couple of people on here. We just wanted to hop on real quick and chat. Not, I don't have much. We'll have to figure out another when we come on again, another topic. Or
Right. Yeah,
and then I
definitely.
don't know if we want to talk about maybe training or something more specific.
But I think you hinted on it too, right? With the budget thing, right? So people have to be smart with their budgets, right? Reallocating of resources. Do I really need this want versus need, right? They want these vehicles or certain things. Do they really need them? or again, I think that again the bigger need for my perception is on defensive tactics training, right? Grappling, controlling the suspect, um, all those things, right? So I feel comfortable handling myself if I'm going against an aggressive person. You know what's funny? And I seen this in myself too, right? And I think I told you about this. So you and I have been training since 2017, I believe, right? And then we were rolling in the garage and we went. And this was 20, I think it was like 2018. So we've been rolling for a while, and then we were sparring in your garage. I was in Charleston, South Carolina,
Man,
and
hold on. This is my little bro right here.
shooting to neutralize versus shooting to preserve life. We'll get into that right now. You and I have Dr. Kish about that. So I was in Charleston,
He
South Carolina, right?
that might be another. We might have to do another episode
There is,
on
and
on
so
on, on that one.
I'm at the bar with my boss and the coworkers, and I go up to get a drink, and I notice I order my drink and my shoes untied, and I look down, I'm tying my shoe, and this guy goes, "Hey, you!" And he's screaming. I'm looking like me. He goes, "Yeah, we're gonna fight." And I'm like, I don't even know who this dude is. This big, he's a pretty heavy set dude, and I'm like, okay, because I'm like, I'm not, we barely got there. I'm only got one drink. I'm sober still, and he comes up. He's like, "You're not scared." I'm like, "You said you wanted to fight, okay?" And then so I'm ready to position myself, and he goes, "You about to do some shit?" I'm like, "Well, you said you wanted to fight." He goes, "Oh man, so where do you trade?" And he starts asking me about stuff like that. And then he goes, "Well, what do you do for a living?" And I was in the Air Force. And he goes like, "Oh, I was in the Navy." He went from telling me we are gonna fight to buy me a shot because how calm I was. And I think that calmness was because we just train all the time. We put ourselves in that situation. Because I
I would
know.
have, as soon as he walked up, I'd have smacked him.
Well,
I
then
know, I know my
you
boy.
and I
I
throw
know my
hands.
boy E Dub is like, nah, I'd have smacked him.
Me and you were throwing hands. Right? We were sparring with the gloves. We were kickboxing with Rich and George and everybody. And so I was already like looking his legs. I was gonna leg kick him and take out his knee and come over the top. I was ready, but I was just calm about it. And I can't describe that calm to people who've never trained, right? And that training definitely helps. But this shoot
I
to neutralize to shoot to further, I kind of want to touch on this because um,
I just don't.
you
I'm looking at the time my kids are going to call, and I know we're.
this is
Um,
gonna go longer. I know. Well, let's
yeah.
talk about this next week. Let's talk about this next week.
Hey, Molly Mall, man, we're gonna do a we're gonna do a topic, a section just on this. And it will actually. I'm glad you brought it up. It we'll be able to clear the air on a lot of things and how police officers are actually trained when it comes to officer involved shooting. So we'll get that next week. It just it I'm looking at the time. It will just be way too convoluting, and we got a late start because we were on
We did. We did. We did. We did.
IG as well. Talking on that. So
Right.
yeah, I think I don't like to because I'm older now, man. Getting into fights and all that. At my age, you should be trying to talk yourself out of a fight, not into a fight. But I do sometimes catch myself being a little, feeling a little confrontational. Just like I'm like, I think sometimes I look at like arrogance of people, like someone who just doesn't do any type of training, even if they like work out just a little bit, but they don't do any type of training, and then just thinking that,
They can whoop somebody.
or not even just somebody like me specifically.
Oh,
I'm just
right.
like,
So that's what gets
like,
me. Like, this is what gets me too, because they're like, some people will see this person, right, and all they do is lift weights, right, and they got a nice body, right, and then they go, "Oh, that guy, I bet you he can fight." And I go, "What makes you think that?" "Well, he's in great shape." And I'm like, "Well, if you know anything about muscles, those big muscles take a lot of oxygen to move. You get him moving, he's gonna gas out unless he's conditioned to do that type of moving, right? And most people aren't. It's just, and so it's funny that people's perception of what
I
makes
mean,
You
In the
know,
fight game, I mean, size does matter. It sucks. Like when I
it
have to
does.
train against his name's Tim, and I don't know, Tim's probably 230. He's 230. He's a purple belt, and
Ooh,
so you got a guy who's 230, and he's swole 230, and then he trains. So he's a mess. The only thing I can do to neutralize him are leg locks. Like I use leg locks because he's just too big, right? So size does matter, but um, you have to if it starts to go any amount of time. Like I feel comfortable. Like if I was just to slap, like because we joke around and stuff a lot at the barbershop, and guys talk
hmm
about boxing and all that.
right.
I feel even at my age, I feel very comfortable, um, like boxing with a lot of people, just because I feel too. And a lot of people are going to gas out. They're going to exert a lot of, energy, especially grappling too. You're going to exert a lot of energy. And one thing I know for sure, I mean, we went to Peerless. We'll get like 10 rolls, 10 5-minute rolls. So, I mean, we rolled for 50 minutes. I know if nothing else, I can grapple and I can roll around with somebody for a long time. I don't know if somebody else, if their body can last for that long. So,
I agree. Like I said, that type of movement, right? Because that's one thing you and I are because of our training is efficient with our movement, right? There's not a lot of wasted movement. There's a lot of people that are untrained. They waste a lot of movement, right? They do a lot of things to and that waste energy. And so when you have a limited take and then you waste energy on top of that, you're gonna just gas yourself out.
yeah, like somebody like my boys Ian Jamal. Like I think Jamal's like 6'3", 6'4". I think my boy he's the one I told you strong. I mean, and he's deceiving because he's got a very lean frame. So
Right.
people will like look at him and you think he's skinny, but he ain't skinny.
Mm,
And like I said, this is somebody like this is like my little bro. We grew up together. This dude is, I mean, a phenomenal athlete and strong as an ox. And
right.
what's scary is he's cool. He's one of them dudes that'll lull you to sleep because he'll be cool with you. So you have a tendency, and same thing with Molly Mall, you think these dudes are soft.
Right,
And
right,
then
right.
you realize, like, he probably doesn't remember this, man. We were working at Waxy one night. We were messing around, and he, like, hit me in the mouth accidentally, and I had braces. And dude,
Ooh.
He tore my braces all up, and my mouth was a bloody mess. And like I said, I don't even know if he remembers this. And I was like, man, and I thought to myself, I was mad too at first. And I'm like, man, if he hit me, I was like, man, if he hit me like for real, and, like this, that's how strong. Like he hit me on accident. At least I think it was an accident. At least I think. You know what? I need some get back. I need a rematch. I'm like, man, if he hit me like this and it was an accident, I can't even imagine like if he teed off on me, like someone like him, man. My only hope is I'd have to you know, get him to the ground and then bring him into the deep water and just
Right.
and just suck the life out of him. But all of it really goes back to when we talk about cops, man. It's our we just don't train. I think if we all were training, if cops just train how I train at the bare minimum, I think we would see, uses of forces, all that stuff. I think we see it would decrease because when you're more confident, just being a smaller guy, when you're more confident,
Right.
you go into a situation just thinking differently. You don't go in going, oh man, I just kind of go in and I assess what's going on. Even if someone's running their mouth or whatever, you never feel that, man, I'm, there are times, I contacted some dudes and I'm just like, man, I tell this, like, I don't want to fight this dude. I just really don't want to. But the reality too, man, is I tell some dudes too, man. I said, look, bro, I don't want to fight you. I tell the big dudes, I don't want to fight you. I said, but I will. And
Eric said,
they respect that. I said, man, I will.
right. Eric said, Lamau, accident, bro. And no, I don't want any parts of you.
He's being humble, man. Eric probably still snapped me like a twig, bro. I think
But
he's being humble.
back to the training. Um, one of the interviews that Ryan Tillman did with Henner, and it was after the fact the Marietta PD Police Department in Georgia announced that they were going to provide funding for officers or incentive for them to go train jujitsu.
Mm-hmm.
And in the statistics from that department, uh, as far as injuries went down, and as well as uh, uh, shootings and stuff went down.
Here's the thing with that, and I don't want to say it's disingenuous, but we have to be careful. I don't
Well,
for one
neighborhood plays a
for,
part, right?
I mean, it does. I have to
Right,
be. We have to be realistic that it goes back when we were talking about Beverly Hills versus East LA. I
right,
I know that the area that I worked in is probably not as bad as Rampart or my boy Molly Mall. He's from Compton.
oh
Um,
yeah, yes.
Areas where he grew up. How but I always say this, and when I say not as bad, probably as bad, but where the differences are between your Comptons, LA, Chicago's, because San Bernardino uh, gives any of those cities a run easily, but they just have more people, so you have more people running amok. So
Right.
maybe instead of 10 gangsters, you got 50 gangsters. So that's what makes it different because you know E and I, we spent a lot of time. We grew up in the IE. We get guys, and I tell dudes that come into Riverside, and these dudes would come in, from LA, talking about I'm from LA or whatever. And I said, man, these dudes in the IE, they don't care where you're from.
Right.
Because there are tough guys everywhere. No, they're Compton, wherever. I always say it's not where you from, where it's at. Hey, there's a
Hmm.
reason why, if you think of it, cats from Compton and South LA, you don't hear about them going into East LA, and you don't hear about cats really from East LA, and the going over there messing with them. There's a reason for that. There is a reason because everybody can hold their own, in their neighborhoods, no matter how small. People ain't going to them little smaller neighborhoods and like San Bernardino and other places. They ain't going over there, not like that.
No.
So, I know I got a little bit off of, tangent, but um so when
But
we look at
but you do
crime,
highlight a good point. You do
we're
highlight a
talking
good
about
point,
crime,
right?
right?
Right.
And training.
Crime and training and uses of force or things like that, right? It's I think the cultural aspect of your neighborhood, right? The cultural dynamic, right? Social, economic, cultural, all those things play a part in how your as an officer, right, interaction is going to be with that neighborhood. The whole Beverly Hills and Compton thing is completely right. Right, your interactions in Beverly Hills are going to be completely different than what it's going to be in Compton, just because of the cultural thing. There's a big cultural thing, plus social and economic status plays a part. So,
Right
uh,
there. I was going to say just poor people.
yeah, Jamal said he repos, so he got confrontations weekly. People are crazy.
Yeah.
They are crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to get every officer up to speed, I mean, I don't know. It's baffling to me the number of, and this is not me bashing cops, but I keep it real. It's baffling to me the number of cops that um they don't train. And those same guys are out there getting in uses of forces. And man, I'd be out there talking trash to them guys. Man, this dude was telling me, he's like, man, take your badge off, take your badge and your gun off. And I said, check this out, youngster. Youngster, and it's funny too. Youngster from he's from LA, he's from 40s, rolling 40s. I said, check this out, youngster. Do you really think that I said you sit around all day, you drink, you smoke weed, you don't work out, you don't train, and then he's on top of it too. He's a little dude.
Mm-hmm.
I said, do you just think that you just gonna whoop my ass? And he's like, "Oh, Martin, you think you big and bad because you were training?" I go, "No, man." Because I would invite them to the gym, and I told at the other gym where we would spar and box, I come to the gym.
Hmm.
That's how serious I was, man. Like and I had to be careful with that because some dudes may show up and smoke me. But
Right.
man, I gave this. This one dude was running his mouth off to me one day on a traffic stop so much. I went and I brought a card from my gym in and gave it to him on the stop, and I said, "Man, you can show up at the gym." So I told him, I said, "Bro, just show up at the gym, and you can whoop me or whatever you think you will do. Just show up at the gym." And this guy's, "Oh man, you think you're big and tough?" No, I don't, because I train with guys who whoop my behind on a regular basis. I know what tough guys are, and I'm not one of them. Which leads me to say too, that's why I know that I will not lose to someone like you because I know what tough guys are.
Right.
Hey, hey, we're gonna let's wrap this up, man. I'm looking at the time, and the kids they're going to
Yeah.
call any minute.
Yeah. No worries, man.
Um, we're gonna have to get on earlier. Shoot me a text or anything, man. If you want me to, you and Jamal, you guys want me to cover anything else? Brandon, remember this one shooting versus. Can you remember that, or am I gonna have to jot it down?
In fact, right now, I got it. The shooting to neutralize versus shooting to preserve life. I got it. I'll take this note down,
I actually
and
think
we'll
that's an
incorporate it.
awesome one. Thanks, little bro, man, because that's something that people ask, and there's a lot of confusion because at the barbershop, people, "Oh, you got to shoot to kill, shoot to kill, you shoot to kill." Um, so we'll address that. We'll do a like, I don't know if we can get to it this week, but maybe we'll come back on next week and we'll just do maybe we'll try to limit these maybe to 35, 40 minutes like we are right
Hmm.
now, and
Yeah.
then get in and out, and hopefully we can get on a little earlier because I know that's part of it too. People, it's 9 o'clock. We only got like 3 people, watching right now. Typically, we have a little bit more than that. So,
Right.
I mean, even on IG, we had like 10, at least 10 at a time. So, um, but other than that, man, I appreciate you. Thanks again,
Yeah. No
and
worries,
I'm
buddy.
sure, bro. I'm sure we'll talk again. If not tonight, tomorrow.
Oh, for sure.
Molly Mall, man, I appreciate you guys, man. I love you guys, and then I'll talk to you guys later on in the week too. All right, later, B.
Later.